I'm here today with my colleague, Michelle Monroe. So I'll introduce myself and then we'll go over to Michelle. I'm Nancy Angevine Sands. I'm a consultant in family engagement with Equal Step. I'm the mother of 3 grown children, a former teacher, and I've been doing family engagement work officially for over a decade and connected with my kids' education for a whole lot longer. Michelle?
Hello, Matt PD. It is such a joy to be joining you. This is my first time participating in Matt PD, so I'm very, very excited, particularly to talk about a topic that's really close to my heart. So like Nance, I'm a mother of 2. A mother of 2 who's still in the public system, very young, grade 4 and 5. And so as I do this work of family engagement, I live it on a daily basis. So most of my days are spent raising my children. And then the other part of my life is spent as a manager within the Toronto District School Board, working on issues of family engagement. So I certainly look forward to this conversation and I hope you enjoy it.
So we're going to start now. This is about co-planning learning. How can you work with your families to move your curriculum along and work with them around planning? So I'm going to start there. Michelle, did it come up?
No, it did not.
I know why.
So Nance, I'll not come up yet. While you do that, oh, I think we're there. Now you're seeing my beautiful, there we go. All right.
There we go. All right.
Wonderful.
So when we're talking about student achievement, if we think of it as a stool, there are 3 components to help students achieve in school. The first, of course, is the student. The work they do, the responsibility they take, the effort they put into it. The next is the school, the educators within the building that help them to learn. And the third component is the family, the support and the engagement that the family contributes to the education of the child is a really large part of student achievement. In fact, many surveys tell us that it's at least the top 5 indicator of student success. And as with a stool, if any one of these are missing, then the student achievement will not be as easy to achieve. So we just wanted to show you this graph because we think it's really indicates why families should be engaged. In a student's life, they spend about 33% of their time asleep, 12% of their time is at school, and 55% of their time is spent away from school. If we aren't engaging our families in education, we're missing out a really large area, really strong component to helping our students to be successful. And that's what we're going to talk with you about today.
So we always like to have family engagement conversations by ensuring that we first define it. So the definition we have for you is adapted partially from Karen Mapp's version.
So I'm just stopping for a minute. Michelle, you stop talking. I think we're having a lot of problems today. So we'll go back to the screen and hope that she comes back to us. Michelle was saying that this is from Dr. Karen Mapp.
PD. Something just went wrong with my connection, but I think I'm back up.
You are back.
So we'll just keep going. Yeah. So we say it's continuous across a child's life. And we recognize that families are consistently engaging their children. It happens from birth. And like Nancy said earlier, she's got kids that are adults, but she's still engaging in their lives. And so what we say to educators is there's a time period you have with children, and the engagement happens not just in a school or classrooms, but it happens outside the home because engagement happens beyond the school. It cuts across and reinforces learning. And that's just this idea that learning is happening in so many places when we think of our children. It happens in classrooms, it happens in homes, it happens in mosques, it happens in churches, it happens in neighborhoods. And so as the educators, we've got to really think about all the places where this learning is happening so we can maximize that opportunity. And we'll be talking a little about that earlier. And that it affirms and strengthens the family's cultural, racial, and linguistic identities. It means for us that in this time, as we move across our global world, we recognize that our families come from lived a variety of racial, cultural, linguistic, geographical experiences, and that it's so essential that the engagement strategy in which values that and affirms that, and not just grounds that in the student, but also ensure that the family's lived experiences are grounded in the classroom. And the last point, that it enhances ability to effectively support their children's learning, that we've got to be constantly focused on how are we ensuring that families have what they need to enhance and support their children's learning. So why do this work? Why do we encourage this work in schools and outside? Because research has told us, I think it's over 50 years of research now, has told us that the impact of engagement, that it improves student achievement. We've seen it reduced absenteeism, it's enhanced and improved behavior, students' confidence are restored, parents' confidence are restored, but we've also learned that engagement also benefits teachers, because when teachers are engaging families and families and teachers have a great relationship, teachers really value what they do every day. They come in, they value working with children, they recognize the supports of families, and it really makes them not just want to be there, but want to really, really thrive in that environment.
So the research tells us that for engagement to be effective, it has to be relational, linked to learning, and build family capabilities. And I want to talk about this just for a minute. Engagement begins with relationships. This is when you make a relationship with a child's family and they make a relationship with you, that's going on the road to partnership, to working together. And relationships begin with communication. We're going to look at that very shortly. Engagement has to also be linked to learning. Everything that you do, that you say, oh, I'm engaging with my families, ask yourself first, how is this linked to learning? And finally, it builds families' capabilities. All of our families, no matter where they come from or what they look like, have the capacity to support their children's learning, but many of them don't have the capabilities. And so in our work, we have to try to build those capabilities as we go along. And that's what we're going to get to now. So we're going to talk to you about 4 steps for co-planning learning.
Our first one is making contact. You know, there's a quote that Nancy uses often, and it says, it's always easier for the school to reach out than our families to reach in. Did you borrow that from Steve, Nancy?
I believe I did. Yep.
Yeah, so let's give that credit there. And the idea is it's so important that teachers are actually reaching out first. And how you do that is going to be ways that works within the realm of the classroom and your scheduling. So we ask that you're either doing a phone call or introduction letter or a survey, whatever tool it is you choose to use. The ask is that there is some kind of a reach out with that child's family to make a contact. The purpose of the contact, to talk to, introduce yourselves to the family, talk to the family about their children, what are their strengths, what are their hopes, but also ask the family if they have any goals for their children this year. Ask about strengths. Are there areas, but also what kind of supports do you think your child may need to ensure that they have a successful year? And the other thing is just, how can I maintain continuous communication with you, and how can we work collectively to ensure that your child have a great year? So step 2 is where you take that first initial contact, and I say you go in depth. What I mean by that is you dig just a little deeper now, because remember Nancy said earlier that family engagement must be linked to learning. So while the first step gave you the initial contact, the second step is now about going just a little more deeper and in depth to begin to have those meaningful learning goals conversations. So we recommend that second contact be face-to-face. Now, in this century, physically in the classroom, it could be what you're participating now. It really depends on your community and your parents, what that looks like for you. Could be a Skype, whatever works. But we ask that it be face-to-face, so it provides an opportunity for the family and you to meaningfully connect. Because remember, we talked about connection and relationships are important in this work of engagement. So within this second contact, you're going to start reviewing the family's goals of learning for their children. And you're going to ask some very specific questions about what are the strengths of the child, what are you seeing? But you're also talking now about what you're seeing, because you've now had an opportunity in the classroom to observe what the child is doing, to gain and do an assessment of his or her capacity, skills and bills, and skills and abilities. And so now you're at the place of actually saying, here's what I'm seeing. And I'm hearing you say this is what. So this now gives you the opportunity to start doing some co-planning and start setting some goals for the term between you and that parent about that child. Now, many are saying, so what, is the child a part of this? Is the child not a part of this? We're going to say that this initial in-depth contact and conversation, I recommend that it be between the teacher and the parents to this journey. At a later date, of course, the child could be brought in, the student could be brought in. But at this point, we're saying the co-planning and the thought begins with the school and the family having this conversation about the goals. And then we start talking about roles and responsibilities. And this is really essential because it is really important that you're clear to the parents about what you will be doing as a teacher in the classroom and how you will be doing it. Right? And then you're going to provide and ask the parent what they believe they have the capacity to do and how they can support their child with these goals that's been set with this co-planning. And then you always want to end this dialogue with any questions that the parent or family may have. And I also say, with also a part of your plan must be how you're going to continue this communication throughout the term or year.
So step 3 is going to deepen home learning, and it's based on step 2, which is your initial reach out. This is where, through whatever media you choose to use, it could be Twitter, it could be a blog, it could be an email, it could be a website, whatever works best for you, letting the family know what's happening in your classroom. This is what we're learning this week. This is what we've done today. This is what the unit is going to be. It depends on what level you're teaching at. If you're teaching in elementary level, it's probably easier to be doing Twitter or one of the apps that reach out to families. If you're teaching in middle or high school, you may want to have a website or a blog where you just let them know, this is the unit, this is what we're working on, this is what they're going to have to know, these are the expectations that I have. You're also going to give the family tips to support that learning at home. And at the end of this session, we have some examples to link you to that you can go and see what some other teachers are doing. But just things like, we're working on geometry this session. Go through your house and see how many right angles you can find. Or I made 12 cookies and I have 14 students. How do I divide them up evenly? Little things like that. Or you give them links to places on the internet, or books in the library, or resources at community centers that the family could go to find things that will help their student and will help them learn. Part of the home learning process is also having an opportunity for you to receive feedback from the family. If we aren't having an opportunity for our parents to respond back to us from what we're giving them, then what we're establishing is a monologue. And what we really want is a dialogue. How can your families tell you what they see, tell you how they feel about what they see? How can they ask you questions? Can they give you suggestions? And then, how are you going to use the feedback you get from the families to inform the work you do as you move on? Finally, step 4. Michelle?
Yes, before we move to step 4, Nancy, I just wanted to add quickly that although we highlighted most of the online communication tools, that for those teachers who are not yet there, you can do this with just sending information home. So you could be sending it home, whether it be on a weekly basis to talk about what units you're covering, and just providing families with recommendation about key questions that they can ask at home. Or for those who are still using agendas, those are the papers, books that students bring home. There are just different ways, if you're not yet using technology or any form of social media, that you could still be sending those things home. All right, Nan, step 4.
Thank you. So step 4 is what we like to call family PD. As teachers, we get PD all the time, but we never think to give PD to our families. And then we may become frustrated with what the families are doing with our learning and our teaching once that gets into the home. For example, I've heard from teachers before, I spent a whole week teaching them how to do math this certain way, and they went home and a bunch of students came back and their parents said, that was a silly way to do it this way. So when we offer our families PD on what the learning is and how they can support it at home, what's happening in the classroom is also happening at home. This can happen in a number of different ways. You can organize family workshops that could occur during the day, or it's better in the evening. And I understand that that's adding another layer of responsibilities to your work, but the way it works for you is best. And this is where you're going to give them learning strategies, a sort of I do, you do, we do type of event. So what does that look like? You might do it for a specific unit or a specific skill that you're teaching. At first, you're going to model the learning so they can almost teach the parents what you've taught in the way you've taught the children, so they can see exactly what the students are learning. Then you're going to give them an activity where they can practice the learning, and then they go home with some tools that they can use to continue the learning over the space of a month or 2 months, however long you've decided. If you don't want to send them home with hands-on tools, the tools can also go, this is where social media comes in. You can also use your Twitter or your email or your website account to provide different activities that the parents can do. The second family PD can be an open classroom type thing. And this is where you have an open classroom day whenever you want, once a month, once a term, where parents can come into the classroom. They can watch a lesson or two being taught. And as well, they don't just sit at the back of the classroom and then leave. They take part in the learning. They take part in the activities that the students have to do. They learn what their student's day is like. They learn how they're learning. They have a real idea of what's happening. And now they can ask questions that are more relevant to the student when they're sitting around the table. And hopefully those, what did you do at school today? Nothing. Conversations will end. The third thing you can do is to help parents to understand assessment and evaluation. This is really important at our middle and high school levels. Our parents want to know how their children are doing, but they also want to know, how did you get that mark? How are they assessed? What are they looking at? Where you're marking on a rubric, they want to know, what does that mean? What is a 5-paragraph essay in grade 10? What does that look at a level 1? And what does it look like at a level 4? Giving them that explanation. So now when their child is writing that 5-paragraph essay, they can look at it and they can say, well, what was the question you had to do? And they can perhaps give a little bit more feedback than they could before. And Michelle and I also want to let you know that this work doesn't have to be done alone. Every school in Ontario and in most schools across Canada, and I know that in the States, they have PTAs, and in other countries around the world, in Britain and Australia, they have groups that are parent-led. Go to your parent group in the school, tell them what you'd like to do, and ask them for their help. Their job is to help support student achievement. A lot of them think that their main job is to raise funds. It's not. It's to support their students. And if they can help you to organize one of these workshops or to organize an open classroom, then why not work together and make both of your jobs just a little bit easier? Michelle?
So I'm just going to go through our 4 steps. So the first is to make contact. Remember, it's easier for the school to reach out than a family to reach in. So please do not yet let 3-4 months go by when you've not yet connected with the home, or we ask that you do not wait for the home to come to you, and that you're connecting in directly. The second depth contact, use your first contact to use that in-depth contact as an opportunity to talk to the parent, to learn about the family's goals for their children, and to begin some co-planning together about some goals. And I want to be clear that when we're talking about co-planning of goals, those goals could be academic, it could be behavioral, whatever that goal is in the best interest for that child to move that child forward, we ask that it be done co-planning. And the last thing is the deep home learning, because once we begin that co-planning, the goals have been set, the teacher's now sending the necessary relevant information to the home. We want to deepen the home learning. We want the family be expanding on that information that the students are covering at home, and that really requires that information to go home, support and resources for the family. And you know, there is this thing that they talk about a lot in the research in America called the dual capacity, and we're asking that about ways that we're building capacity to be able to effectively engage in their children's education and their learning. And so wherever the opportunity presents, we're asking that there could be a workshop happening for the family on a particular area. And my favorite actually is when teachers open the classroom. I absolutely love that idea, where family can come into the classroom and they can see the classroom and they can begin a learning or participate in a learning unit with the students, and they can really begin to understand how the school works. Nance?
That's you.
So remember, be innovative, be creative. Providing you today are 4 steps and in co-planning. But we're encouraging you to take that even further, right? Where we've seen this innovation where teachers are actually engaging families in local neighborhoods. In the classroom is in a local neighborhood, it's in a community. We're seeing this really being innovative, and Nancy will show ways where some teachers are doing that. And do what you can when you can, but you're collectively and you're co-planning with families about their children. They are your students, but it is their children. And that we recognize that when we're talking about families, that varies depending on a particular child and student. And so wherever there is a particular adult or significant adult that can support this children's learning of journey, we ask that the school and the classroom is open to that. Engaging families in learning improves student achievement, and it closes achievement gap. But we also know that we have to do this work intentionally. If we just do it randomly, we don't do it in a systemic, consistent way. If we're not doing things that are linked and relational and connecting families to the classroom, we won't see these things. But we know from research that there are significant activities we can engage in that we know can close opportunities gap and increases achievement.
So we promised you a couple of samples. The first one is from Peter Cameron, and this is his website and his Twitter handle. If you just go on his Twitter, you'll see examples of what Peter calls home share. He's gotten rid of homework and he's turned it to home share. And the example I gave about the cookies comes from Peter. He sends home tweets, and he has a blog as well where it lets the families know what's happening in the classroom through Google Hangouts as well. They can follow along on some of the adventures they've gone on through National Geographic. And he's done some wonderful things to help parents understand what their children are doing and to understand how they can help them at home. Peter also did a session on MAD-PD earlier this morning at 10 o'clock about home share. So I encourage you to look at the MAD-PD page and try to find that for more information. The next one is Aviva Dunsinger. Aviva Loca is her Twitter, and she will just fill up your Twitter feed with all of the wonderful work that she does with her students. She's a kindergarten teacher, letting her families know all the things that's happened. The Instagram page will take you also to pictures of what she's doing. Aviva did a wonderful thing earlier this year where she had an art day. She works with her children around art and learning through art a lot. She had an afternoon where all of the families were invited in, and they had stations set up as they do every day. And the families followed their students around and did art projects together. The families who couldn't be there Aviva set up ways so that they could find out what was going on and see it. And many of them did work at home and then sent it in. The third link is to my podcast, which is about family engagement. And the reason it's there is because I have interviewed both Peter and Aviva on the work that they've done. And so you could go to this link and find the podcast from Peter and Aviva and for more details of what's happening. So
on that note, MAD-PD, I just want to say thank you. This has been a really wonderful, and I certainly hope someone will listen here and be inspired.
Thanks so much for joining us. It was a rough start at the beginning, but Michelle and I always love to talk about one of our favorite topics, family engagement, especially family engagement and learning. If you have any questions, you can find both of us on Twitter. I'm at With Equal Step, and Michelle is at PCEO TDSB. Is that right, Michelle?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, great. Thanks for joining us.